Hello, I'm Campbell Burnap with part 6 of High Notes and Home Runs, the life of trumpeter Harry James. Last week we heard how, after nearly 3 years of financial struggle running his own big band, Harry's luck gradually changed. His instrumental recording of You Made Me Love You had appealed to an influential disc jockey in New York, and consequently thousands of young swing fans became wild about Harry. By Christmas 1941, after the December bombing of Pearl Harbor, America was at war. James's ultra-romantic trumpet sound helped to soothe the fears of an emotionally vulnerable nation. But he still loved to swing out in what sometimes seemed an echo of his famous musical duels with Gene Krupa back in Benny Goodman days. Although his own spectacular trumpet playing was always the main attraction, Harry kept an ear open for sidemen who could offer outstanding jazz solos. At the end of 1941, he'd taken on 17-year-old tenor saxist Corky Corcoran, but there was nothing immature about the teenager's soloing. In order to comply with a law which required juveniles to be supervised on tour, Harry had legally adopted Corky Corcoran. This generous act just might have had something to do with the fact that not only was the kid a fine jazz soloist, but he was also a red-hot third bass specialist, exactly what the James Band's baseball team was looking for. Later on, that sublime soloist Willie Smith would join Corcoran in the saxophone section. Both would stay for years and years, but nobody could ever outshine the boss. Late in 1941, when Harry James hired Pee Wee Monty as his manager, the band was over $40,000 in debt. By the following year, things appeared to be moving out of the red. The original heavy interest loan from Benny Goodman had been repaid, the sidemen were getting their wages on time, and Hollywood was taking an interest in the young swing star. And the gossip columnists were already checking out news of a romantic attachment between Harry and his classy singer Helen Forrest, both of them already married, of course.
Harry and I had a togetherness, and I think I took on his sound after a while, and I'm very flattered. I think it was a great coupling. Of course, it went a little farther than that. Whenever there was a vocal, we had eye-to-eye contact, because I found myself phrasing like he did, like he played the trumpet. Oh, there's no question about it. Man was very instrumental in my work, what I did. He rubbed off on me, and I couldn't be happier.
The voice of Helen Forrest, 40 years after her passionate affair with Harry James had ended, but clearly still a little bit in love with him. Back in 1942, though, Helen was about to appear on the Hollywood screen with her boss, first in a black and white B-movie, Private Buckaroo, an army life musical. One critic said it was as ridiculous as a zoot suit and just as shapeless, but it did gross $1 million for Universal. By now, the James Gang were radio regulars, too, on the Coca-Cola spotlight shows, and while filming out in California, they were also smashing attendance records at important dance and theater venues. One Los Angeles columnist reported that Harry was now receiving 3,000 fan letters a week. Meanwhile, for propriety's sake, he and Helen were living in separate Hollywood apartments. But he had proposed to her earlier, and although still married to Louise Tobin, bought her a diamond engagement ring. In June 1942, the James Band was signed by 20th Century Fox to appear in a Technicolor movie called Springtime in the Rockies, starring Betty Grable, John Payne, Carmen Miranda, and Cesar Romero. Harry's eyes were now seen to be as brilliantly blue as his snappy suit, while Helen, apparently arriving from an Indian teepee, sang as she strolled past happy holidaymakers and Canadian Mounties.
In a dream, the strangest and the oddest things appear, and what insane and silly things we do. Here is what I see before me, vividly and clear. As I recall it, you were in it too. I had the craziest dream last night. Yes, I did. I never dreamt it could be. Yet there you were in love with me. I found your lips close to mine, so I kissed you, and you didn't mind it at all. When I'm awake, such a break never happens. How long can a gal go on dreaming? If there's a chance that you care, then please say you do. Say it and make my craziest dream come true.
The New York Times reviewer reviewing Springtime in the Rockies ended his review with the words, "For the record, it should be mentioned that each appearance of band leader Harry James on the screen was the signal for frenzied applause yesterday. A totally mysterious phenomenon as far as this corner is concerned."
Hey, running deer, is that Harry James solid or is he solid?
Of course he's solid, White Cloud, but it's that Miller groove that sends me.
Check.
Well, many 1940s swing fans had fun throwing around a little jive talk, and that included the two Red Indian Braves from Central Casting, the camera swinging around to them after Harry and Helen's version of I Had the Craziest Dream. And Harry was allowed to speak on screen to the glamorous leading lady, Miss Grable. The exchange was brief, but hip.
Well, how was it? Too fast, too slow?
As usual, Harry, too terrific.
Of course, the big bands were a boon to the Hollywood movie makers during World War II, quite apart from the fact that despite a lot of the major bandsmen having gone into the service, the bands were still big box office. And also, of course, movies became very static during World War II because gasoline rationing kept people from going out and doing location filming. So it was ideal to get a couple of bands in and just concentrate on their numbers and fill up valuable screen time and also bring young people into the movie houses. I was a fan of the James Band, but probably because I was also a great fan and lusted after Betty Grable. In fact, I think I can remember the very scene, the Betty Grable scene, in which I suddenly attained puberty.
Like the teenage Dick Vosborough and thousands of GIs, Harry James also found himself excited by America's #1 cheesecake. The feeling was mutual, and when the James Band returned to the West Coast at Christmas time, the two stars had their first date, Harry giving Betty Grable a lift home via a drive-in hamburger joint after both had made appearances for the troops that night at the Hollywood Canteen. A full-blown romance gradually bloomed, creating much grief for Betty's possessive suitor, George Raft, and Harry's infatuated employee, Helen Forrest. Upset as they were by Harry James's successful wooing of Betty Grable, the anguish of George Raft and Helen Forrest couldn't compare with the sense of desolation felt by Harry's long-suffering wife. At Harry's request, Louise had abandoned her singing career to raise a family. A second son, Timothy, was born in March 1942. Again, the trumpeter was nowhere to be seen, and again, it was Louise's sisters in the Southwest who opened their doors to her.
And so thus began the disintegration of my life as I had known it. And I was soon to discover the dark side of this man to whom I'd been married all these years that I had never experienced. His inhuman side, that cold, icy stare like you're not there. Well, this was something that I had never experienced and was a total shock to me mentally and emotionally. His absolute indifference to his own children, and especially in that it was his idea to start his family. As that time progressed, it seemed like everybody in the world knew about his past womanizing. I seemed to be the only person that didn't know. Found out that when my first child was born that he was in Florida with a band, yes, but he was also there with Eleanor Holmes' stand-in from the World Fair show. And it wasn't so much that he had to be back to the band, I guess, as he had to be back to her. These were all things that I didn't know, and so it was a terrible shock to realize that I had been married to a man that had two sides to him. The other side seemed to prevail as time went on, and he became more, shall I say, in love with himself and shut the world up and just did as he pleased, when he pleased, and how he pleased.
Louise had been there for Harry when he was struggling, but as Peter Levinson pointed out in the James biography Trumpet Blues, as soon as he became important, Louise meant nothing to him. And hard-bitten Mickey Screamer, the band's drummer in those days, told Levinson that, "Once I realized that this was the most selfish guy I was ever likely to meet in my career, I had no trouble getting on with Harry."
The Coca-Cola Company puts the spotlight on the band. All week, the reports have been pouring in. By telephone. By telegraph. By airmail. And by their total, the nation knows that our band, the champion of champions, answers when this trumpet blows. Well, it's a natural. Yes, sir, the name's Harry James, throwing a Spotlight 7 for his 7th championship Saturday night appearance. Harry made the trip all the way out here to Hollywood to appear in this new Universal Motion picture, Private Buckaroos, and incidentally, to break the all-time attendance record at the Hollywood Palladium. And now he makes the trip right back from Hollywood to your house by Spotlight Express. And here he is to express his Spotlight sentiments, Harry James.
Thank you, Ken Niles. And our sentiments can all be expressed in one word, and that is thanks. We've said it many times here on these Saturday night Spotlight programs, but it's one thing that we never get tired of saying.
And I might add, we never get tired of hearing it. And folks, that's the wind-up, and here's the pitch. It's the first half of the first inning, and the home team is at bat. And here's a hit, Harry James' recorded version of Music Makers.
Harry James and his Music Makers were soon a big hit elsewhere on radio. Bandleader Glenn Miller had been the very popular incumbent on the Chesterfield Cigarette Show, a 15-minute slot 3 days a week on the CBS network. But Mr. Miller was about to become Captain Miller, taking his music and musicians into uniform. He chose Harry James as his replacement, and so successful was Harry with an estimated 35 million listeners that the Chesterfield show was soon being rebroadcast as the Harry James Show to U.S. service personnel around the world. In 1942, the trumpeter had won 42 national popularity polls, grossed $750,000, been named #1 band in the country by Downbeat magazine, and was picked out by Barry Ulanov of Metronome magazine as
the man who gives the fans the most for their money. His taste is the public's taste. His pulse runs wonderfully right along with that of the man in the street and the woman on the dance floor.
Early in 1943, the lengthy stay on top of the Billboard hit parade, enjoyed by the recording of I've Heard That Song Before, underlined Ulanov's opinion. It's been estimated that at its peak, the swing era represented a $100 million industry, employing 40,000 musicians across America. The dance floors were packed, and no one knew better than Harry James how to keep them that way. James records by the thousand were being sold to an eager public, but from August 1942 until November 1944, no new ones were being made by any sort of instrumental combo in America. This was due to the recording ban implemented by the Powerful Musicians Union, its response to the big record companies ignoring their request for a royalty on music played over the radio. Harry, though, was becoming busy in a different kind of studio. He was now a movie star, and early in 1943 was back in Hollywood to appear in MGM's Best Foot Forward, starring Lucille Ball, Tommy Dix, June Allison, Gloria DeHaven, and an exuberant Nancy Walker. The setting was a military college. Harry played himself, the visiting star bandleader, while Nancy, vaguely resembling a cheery Lou Costello in a dress, is a young guest looking for a guy who can dance. She drags the famous trumpeter off the stage to jitterbug with her.
I'm alive and kicking. I want a guy who'll arrive and quicken the beat of my feet when the jive starts ticking. I want a guy who can dance. If the dive you're picking happens to try to deprive this chicken, start every heart that's alive and kicking. Get me a guy who can. First come, first serve. My heart is not reserved. You can rejoice that you're not second choice. I'm alive and kicking. Must have a guy who'll arrive and quicken the beat of my feet when the jive starts ticking. Taking a chance with the first pair of pants that should make an advance. I'm ready to dance.
Peter Levinson says in his James biography, the jitterbug sequence was both sensual and comic. His agility, which had been developed under a circus tent and later served him so well on the baseball diamond, was very apparent on the dance floor. Well, after Harry plays his famous version of Flight of the Bumblebee, Nancy and her two girlfriends approach the bandstand. A cue for the Mrs. Walker, Allison, and DeHaven to offer their youthful point of view.
Oh, Mr. James.
Yes?
That was awfully good, but I certainly hope you're not going to stick to the classics.
Well, what's wrong with the classics?
Oh, brother, I can't stand them. You can. Say, maybe we've got something in common. If it's common, we got it.
Well, if you don't like the B's, stop buzzing around and tell us what you do like.
The 3 B's.
The 3 B's?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Boys, the hive is full of jive. Let's wrap it up so they can sell it.
I never want to hear Johann Sebastian Bach, and I don't want to listen to Ludwig Beethoven, and I don't give a hoot for old Johannes Brahms. The B's we want are these. The B's we want are these. There's the Barrel House, the Boogie Woogie, and the Blues. Yes, the Barrel House, the Boogie Woogie, and the Blues.
I was annoyed, as were most of my friends, about the way Hollywood sometimes cast these band leaders in kind of demeaning roles. I mean, I think it's the movie Best Foot Forward. Harry James and his band, one of the top bands in the whole country, are playing at a military school prom. And you sort of think, what? Come on, they wouldn't do that. In another picture with Esther Williams, Bathing Beauty, he and his band are helping out in a concert at a music school. Come on.
Filming on MGM's next big musical, Two Girls and a Sailor, started almost immediately. June Allison, Gloria DeHaven, and Harry James were signed up for that one too. The male lead was Van Johnson, while such stars as Jimmy Durante, Lena Horne, Hosea Turby, and Xavier Cugat were also hired to add little pockets of musical magic. But nothing was more effervescent than the number featuring June Allison and Harry James.
Music of Harry James. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Tweet, tweet, tweet. All of the girls are staking their claims on the pin-up man in the picture frame, on the man with the two front names, Harry James. Nobody's quite the same as Harry James. Nobody's quite as famous as Harry James. You can have Gary and you can have Carrie, but I'm just wild about Harry. Blow man. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, man. Man. Can blow the trumpet like the young man with a horn. He blows it hot, blows it sweet, can't be beat. Harry! He's the young man with a
June Allison's showstopper in MGM's Two Girls and a Sailor, and the mention of Harry in the same sentence with Gary and Carrie, Messrs. Cooper and Grant, confirmed that the trumpeter was not only exciting on the ear, but was now an extremely watchable Hollywood personality, one who could draw young people into the cinema. Harry's career and private life were now entering a flamboyant carnival phase. His successful courting of Betty Grable prepared millions of impressionable showbiz buffs for what to them represented a fabulous union, the new king of swing with America's #1 pin-up girl. Betty, like Harry, had been an entertainer since infancy. With a dominating mother behind her, she'd made her first movie appearance as a 14-year-old chorus girl as early as 1930. Just as America entered the war, a routine studio photograph showing Grable in a white bathing suit and smiling back over her shoulder at the camera began to decorate the walls of barrack rooms around the globe. Fox's publicity department proclaimed it the picture that launched 1 million dreams and promptly insured her famous legs for the same amount of dollars. At 26, Betty felt ready for marriage. Ex-boyfriend George Raft, jealous, generous, and passionate, but already married to a staunch Roman Catholic opposed to divorce, was unavailable. But Harry, despite a wife and 2 infant sons to consider, and his official status as family breadwinner still keeping him safely out of the army, proposed to Betty Grable and was accepted. I'm Campbell Burnap. Please join me next week as Hollywood's most famous pair negotiate some tricky waters. You see, Betty was already pregnant with Harry's child. Good night.